Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of SUGTalks. I'm Craig Dale, your host, and together with our special guest, we'll take a deep dive into the topics, challenges, and opportunities facing SAP users today. Please make sure you hit that subscribe button so you never miss another episode. I'm delighted to be joined today by Tina Rosario, Head of Data Innovation and Chief Data Officer for Europe at SAP. So, welcome, Tina.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here.
Oh, it's great to have you back. And in today's episode, we're going to be discussing SAP data strategy and management. And just before we get into that topic, I suppose sticking to a data theme, I just thought I'd ask you, what was your first computer?
Oh my goodness gracious.
And while you think about that,
Yeah.
mine was a Texas Instruments TI 9948. Now I'm really showing my age now. And it was I got this because it had a proper keyboard and it had a tape deck on the side, and then about I think 2 months later the BBC came out, and then the BBC just took over everything. So I was kind of left with my Texas Instruments machine, which I absolutely loved at that age. But everything went over to the BBC, and all of the games and everything was made for that. But anyway, that's me, Tina. What was
Yeah,
yours?
no, I remember in graduate school getting my MBA and doing my writing on a Mac.
Oh, wow.
One of those, kind of big stand-up Macintosh.
Hmm.
And I really remember floppy disks, the small 3 inch or 3.5 inch floppies, because I had so much of my work on those disks because you had to bring them with you and stick them into the MacBook or stick them into the Macintosh in order for it to retrieve the data. And I remember guarding those with my life because of all the years of effort I had put into writing my thesis and doing all my coursework was all captured now on this little piece of plastic.
Wow. Well, yeah, showing my age again, I remember 5.25-inch
Hmm.
floppy disks before they were reduced to those little, at the time, tiny plastic 3.5. So anyway, we won't dwell on that. So just moving on to our main topic, Tina, and to start things off, I just thought, would you be able to give a little background on yourself and your role at SAP, please?
Yeah, sure. I'm a long time SAPer, a real lover of the company and the technology. It's been 24 years for me.
Wow.
Um, and I didn't start off in data. And frankly, there wasn't a lot around data when I started. It was more around consulting and advising customers. I came from strategy consulting. And I think back then, SAP realized that it needed to be more strategic and having a conversation earlier with the customers to help them build the business case, to help them set up the program for SAP implementations, et cetera. And that was a lot of fun for me. And I started to realize the value of the product and that we really had that expertise in processes. So that was really interesting for me. That evolved into an internal role inside of SAP running our own data management program. And I did that for about 14 years, building up a set of capabilities where we were actually, I like to say, drinking our own champagne. And so that then evolved into the chance to tell our story to our customers because they really want to hear, how did you do it at SAP and what do you think are the best practices? So I've kind of gone full circle and back into an advisory consultancy role where I spend a ton of time with our customers, which just warms my heart. And I do see myself a bit of that kind of always once a consultant, always a consultant. So I really enjoy that part of the job and just love being here.
Oh, thank you. And just while we're on that subject, obviously, I hear you time and time again, especially when I'm talking to members, partners, and SAP, and we're looking at, the customer's journey to S4 HANA and the future, etc. Data and getting the data right and having a strategy, but making sure you've got everything right. Your data is clean, it's correct, it's you've got data governance, etc., is so important to that journey at the beginning. So, could you just explain briefly to me why is data management so important?
Yeah, I mean, Craig, you totally nailed it, right? Data is the big enabler. It can make or break a business process. It can stifle a business outcome. It can cause financial harm and risk. It can result in failure to deliver insights and to predict. Those are really significant opportunities, but also challenges that companies have. To me, there's no question on its importance, and that it requires management. That it's not just something that everybody can, agree on. Yeah, it's important, but what do we do with it? And
Hmm.
here's where the strategy comes in. And how do we ensure that we have a handle on the data that we need to run the business? And that, to me, I think is where companies start to struggle. Is they all want to be data driven, but how do they do that? And what's the best approach is where they sometimes get stuck. I have seen a rise over the years in appointing senior leaders to take care of the topic, but I'm not exactly sure that that role is well defined and that the responsibilities are clear. And oftentimes I see there's still a little bit of shuffling between, whose job is it? Is it the business? Is it IT? Is it some data leader? Is it a group of people? Is it a program? So I do think that it's still very early and young, even though everybody agrees it's needed. I'm not sure that everybody agrees on what the best approach is. And it's also very much a part of a culture and an organization. And so, it does often depend on who the sponsor is, who's willing to take the leadership role, how involved can you get the business, how interested are they, how is the business case, and have you identified the right value pockets, and that sort of thing I think is also an important enabler.
Thank you. And on that point of talking about strategy, how have you seen data strategies evolve perhaps in the last 5 to 10 years?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of technologies have evolved, right? That's the easy part. You can, check and say, okay, we've had, move to the cloud, we've had cloud data storage, we've had the rise of the application, we've had GDPR, right, in terms of regulations. What to me has remained constant is the need for business leadership, and as I said, that balance between business and IT. So that's, not changed. I think that the technology has always been the easy part. The more difficult part of the strategy has been to align the business, right? Get a full understanding of the business objectives, build the right business case, and then execute, 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 and deliver on it. I think historically we've moved from the idea of, I love to tell these stories about data hoarding. In the old days, it used to be more is better. And specifically when, you'd have data scientists coming in and data modeling, that was like, give me more data, I need more. And so we started to kind of dump in and bring in data, maybe not always in the best way. And then with GDPR and some of the regulations, everybody sort of took a step back and said, no, we need less. We need to kind of put some governance in place and put some boundaries in place. And we don't necessarily need more. We need to focus and have appropriate usage of the data and smart storage. And I think now we've kind of come full circle, and we're starting to see that, yeah, okay, we need a bit more. We're starting to bring in more third party data, more modeling data ready for AI. So we're kind of, I think the strategies have evolved even to the point where they're continuing to evolve, and we're needing to kind of pivot and shift with the new technologies, with the new business priorities, and also with, I think, the changes in organizational cultures and designs. Most companies are growing through acquisitions, becoming more global, right? So for me, it's always about keeping it fresh, keeping that data strategy relevant to the business, relevant to the leadership. And that requires, kind of fresh thinking at least each year, if not every few months, just to take a look and make sure that you got your finger on the pulse and that either the efforts and the investment is being delivered in the right way.
And look, just thinking about that, you're talking about culture, senior executive sponsorship, leadership, governance. That will, of course, cost money. So I suppose there's a big part of this is to get the budget inside around it as well. So you're looking at in you as an organisation, you've got that strategic level buy-in, but also you're investing and you've got you I suppose your wallet right to fund it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's the idea of having a sound business case and being able to prove and demonstrate value is super important, because this is the kind of topic that spans across programs. So oftentimes I'll see that there's an investment case for a specific program, like, or a project. Like, let's move to S/4HANA and let's take our SAP environment and modernize it, and that becomes a project, and there's data involved in that. But you might also have another project that is maybe around generating new insights, maybe around new marketing strategies where they also have data and requirements. And so, who funds it is often a big question. Is it funded by the project level? Is it funded at the program level? Is it funded by the business? Is it funded by IT? And for me, the answer is, all of the above. That it's funded by whichever part of the business or IT is willing to support the business case and make the right investments. Um, and I think that's something that companies struggle with because of the nature of data, that, as at the enterprise wide level. I do see, though, to your point about executive sponsors, that if you have a really strong sponsor, and I think one of the best ones that I've seen in my experience working with customers is coming from the CFO or the CIO or the COO, a C-level sponsor who's willing to stand up and say, we need to invest here. We need to do what's right for the organization. Yes, we need this data for our project work and across the various business, but I'm thinking about this as a real strategic asset. This is a real critical, important enabler. And he or she is willing to step up and say, we need to fund this across the enterprise, and oftentimes centrally fund, which is the best case scenario, rather than going around with your tin cup and saying, I need a little bit here from this project and I need a little bit there from that project. That to me tends to get a little bit mucky and gray. It's much better to have somebody at the C level stand up and say, yeah, okay, this is important and we're going to fund it. Let's go.
Yeah, great. And I suppose thinking about that as well, having kind of the funding, but also planning the right level of funding is so vitally important because, as you said, the technology is the easy part. Thinking you're going to buy a data management tool and then that's all you need, that is probably the one of the lower cost items.
Yeah, absolutely. The strategy is not about, hey, we're going to buy this tool, or we're going to move to the cloud, or we're going to build a data warehouse. That's not the strategy. The strategy, in my mind, is what are we aiming to deliver with data in our organization? What business outcomes are we expecting to get, and how does data then enable and drive those outcomes? If you can answer those questions in a very strategic, right, very, very focused way, then you kind of remove the noise of, okay, we need this and that, and we need to spend a little bit here or there. But you're really saying, this is important to enable our 5-year plan. This is important to deliver on our strategy. And so it's kind of a top level investment that's going to have top level benefits too, right? I think it's kind of, this is that balance. You've got to recognize that it goes beyond just kind of a one-time investment in some tool or tech or program, but it is a strategic enabler that requires, yes, a significant investment, but also much more than just a tool. It requires an investment in people, an investment, a change in thinking, an investment in governance, an investment in collaboration, right? They're all those kind of the softer side of the strategies that to me are more important and also at the same time a little more difficult, and require a little bit more time and creativity. But without it, it's just kind of a tool, to your point, or just something that kind of sits on the shelf or that meets a single purpose rather than a broader purpose.
Thank you. And I think, that strategic word is one of the key things you've used there. And so if we look at that, what are some of the trends you're seeing in data strategy, and what new data capabilities are organizations focusing on, I suppose, this year and beyond?
Yeah. I mean, I talked about kind of, we're coming back to volumes of data and thinking about data in terms of quantities for the ability to model and science and bring more insights. I think that we're starting to see really tight integration between data and analytics and intelligence. I think that to me is a real trend, so that it's not just about moving data across the organization and bringing in different data types, different sets, but it's about connecting that data with meaning and purpose and business intention. I see kind of, some really cool thinking around data cataloging and metadata management's kind of coming back up into the forefront, particularly the use of graph technologies to visualize the data models, to do more data discovery, and to have transparency to data lineage and persistence. So being clear on what's the source of the data, how is the data intended to be used, what's the governance needed of that data. I think that graph is a good way to take a look at that and to something that is very kind of business centric. That's also kind of a trend that I see, is that all the presentation of data governance, data tooling, has more of a business lens to it now, where you're making it easier for the business to consume data. There's a data product way of thinking now, and data product management, recognizing that data in and of itself has value and requires planning and building and maintenance, just like any other products would. I think that's a significant trend. And then I mentioned kind of, the eyes and the ears and the sense of the business usage, the consumer way to think about data is hugely popular in terms of data democratization, kind of a buzzword that represents, presenting data to the consumer that is in a way easy for them to ingest, to consume, to discover, to understand, and putting data out into the hands of users, I think is a significant trend. But to me, this all boils down into, how do you ensure that the business has confidence in the data? So you can graph all you want, you can put metadata in, you can create data products, you can democratize the data, but in the end, don't ever forget that it's the quality of that data and the confidence and the trust that the community needs to have on that data that is really valuable. So to me, there's always going to be a trend towards, keeping the lights on, maintaining the appropriate data foundation of the basics of quality management, of risk management, of security and access controls. You've got to get those basics right no matter what else you're trying to do.
Thank you.
We know our community, but we don't know yours yet. Why not share the benefits of your UK&I SUG membership with those who don't know about us? The UK&I SUG referral scheme rewards you for helping to grow and develop our community. You can check out the link in the description to find out more about how you can get involved. Terms and conditions apply. We hope you enjoy the rest of the podcast.
And on that point of getting the basics right, if you like, what are some of the common mistakes that you find organisations make when it comes to data management?
Yeah, thanks. I see it quite often that I talked about kind of, thinking about data work as a project-based piece of work, not as a program or an enterprise-wide initiative, program, effort, priority, but really thinking about data from enterprise and the mindset, not just here's what data is needed for sales, here's what data is needed for marketing, here's what data is needed for R&D or product management or supply chain, whatever, but really through the lens of the overall enterprise, where are the connection points between that data and how do we flow and integrate and consume data across the enterprise. If you don't think of it from that lens, I think you're kind of missing the real opportunities. I also see that sometimes, in the data world, we try to do too much. And so I always kind of go back and say, okay, you're not going to be able to show value if you carve out a chunk of data work that needs to be done that's going to take years rather than months. And I think it's important for us to go back and prioritize and reprioritize if need be with the business so that it is valuable. It's not seen as kind of an effort that isn't actively contributing to business outcomes. And if you're not prioritizing and revisiting your strategy as the business changes, as the business leadership changes, as the needs change, then you're going to miss those opportunities to show that value. And so I think prioritizing is a mistake that people don't really think of it from. They try and do too much and not really focus on data that really matters. And oftentimes you think, I'm not afraid to tell someone that not all data needs to be governed or requires active management. Don't try and do it all. You'll make a mistake of not being able to be successful if you spread yourself too thin. And then you mentioned earlier, and spot on, active business leadership and sponsorship. If you don't have that, and that's a mistake that organizations can make if they don't have someone at the very top that says, yes, I stand behind this program and I'm willing to sponsor it and I'm willing to put my political capital behind it and be the business leader here. And without that, I think that it's a struggle. You're struggling to always, kind of get work done. It just simply becomes an IT function and not really a transformation, enterprise-wide type of a transformation. So having that business sponsor, that active business leadership, I really like to see it too being kind of a forum or a council-wide effort. So it's not just one business leader, but you have the opportunity to collaborate across the different lines of business. There's a significant amount of value when you do that. And I see that also kind of as the enterprise-wide thinking kind of fits into that same approach.
Thank you. Like a data champions group within
Yeah.
the organisation. And you were talking about prioritisation there, and I suppose when I look at our membership, one of the key priorities I'm seeing is that move, that journey to S4HANA. And what advice do you have for those customers who are considering or perhaps really at the start of their journey to get their data management and strategy right up for that move to make it a success?
It's so important, and I know it's top of mind. And I've been through it myself, right, with SAP when we made our own move to S/4HANA, and it wasn't always the easiest thing for us to do inside of SAP. And so I get it. I've been in those shoes. So I also have a checklist of learnings that I'm happy to share with the community. But it's really kind of for me starting early and focusing on the quality work. You're right. I mean, I don't think it's never too early to do data deduplication. It's never too early to do cleanup. It's never too early to kind of get a sense on, what are the right definitions for an accurate, complete, high quality record if you don't have that yet. So defining the rules that you want to have in the future, understanding the to-be data model, because there's a significant change in kind of the ECC way of looking at data inside of SAP versus S/4HANA. So familiarizing yourself on that data model and understanding how it's become more business centric and frankly much more simpler. Um, and then something that I can't say this enough, and I say it so often that I'm sure the people that have heard me talk before is like, okay, Tina, we get it, but archive, please archive. Really, I know people out there have said, oh, we've always planned on archiving, but we've never got around to it. Or we've put some rules in place, but we can't ever get IT or the business to agree to it, so we've put it off. Now's the time to really take a look and say, deduplicate, and then whatever falls out, go ahead and archive it. There's no need to keep those records around anymore, particularly as you're moving to S4. You don't want to bring those antiquated, incomplete, duplicate records into your shiny new S4 system.
Thanks. And you were talking there about data inside SAP, but kind of moving on to now perhaps data outside of SAP. How can organisations maximise the value of non-SAP data?
I see it time and time again too, Craig, right? Is that even the smaller companies have data that's in a hyperscaler environment or that use Nielsen data or Dun& Bradstreet data or merged with another company and so have other data. So yeah, you're right. It's not just about master data or SAP centric data. In today's modern world of cloud and multi-cloud, all types of data are coming into the ecosystem. My recommendation would be to think about it from a lens of the business and from a use case approach. So really understanding what are the use cases, what's the reasoning behind these various data sets, and how do they need to work together? Who will use that data and why are they using it? What's the business processes that are dependent on that data? And then what's the value ultimately for the business? So thinking about combining data and collecting data for a business usage and a business purpose and doing it, from that lens. And then I see the need for kind of smart governance. I mentioned that, not all data needs to be governed. So, if you're ingesting data into your ecosystem, is that data trustworthy? Does that data fit into your governance process? Is that a one-time exercise of data that doesn't really need to go through all the risks and rules and hoops that you've created for other more important data that your business relies on? So being smart about your governance approach when you have multiple cloud environments, when you have multiple data sets. And then lastly, I would say that the need for defining those commonalities within the data so that it can be used in the use cases that you've defined, but in a way that's simple and easy for the business to consume. The worst thing is when you bring in data from another source and you end up with a ton of duplicates because you haven't really thought through, what's the right normalization? How do we standardize that data to the point where it can be consumed by the business without impacting the quality? That's also kind of the worst case is when you bring data in and it's such poor quality that it degrades all the other work that you've done in the past, right? You want to make sure that the data that's needed by the business meets the business standards, and if not, it's put aside and reevaluated perhaps, or or question. There's got to be some governance around it where those parameters are respected, and you make sure that your environments are continuously adhering to the policies and the standards that you and the business have defined.
Thank you. And I suppose in today's cloudy world, shall I say, although looking out the window, I've got blue skies here in Teesside for once, so not from a weather perspective for us,
Yeah.
for once this year. When we're looking at these kind of the modern multi-cloud scenarios, what capabilities do you feel are needed to leverage all types of data? I suppose especially beyond SAP or master data.
Yeah, I mean it's a complicated world we're in now, right? I think that many companies I talk to are leveraging kind of multi-cloud. They don't want vendor lock-in, right? I get it. It's not just about SAP only. They may have other ERPs, or they may have certainly other cloud-based data platforms. That's the world that we're in. I love the analogy of cloudiness and murkiness. So for me, it's about finding clarity, and so kind of moving through those clouds to find the sunshine, right? And thinking of it from how do I make the data that are in these various platforms useful. What's it going to take? This is where I really like data discovery. So, the ability to be able to go in and see, what is that data that's there, and can you profile it? Can you understand the quality of it? Can you understand how it fits and syncs with other data sets that you have in the organization? And then come to a point, and this is where kind of graph kind of comes in, because it can help with the visualization, but then to put an effort on, okay, let's make some decisions on, does that data need to be standardized? Does that data fit and sync with our governance priorities? And do we have the right levels of controls and access around that data? Is that data trustworthy? Right? Answering those kinds of questions in this multi-cloud environment, I think is super important. And having good policies, right? Having good discipline around data that that is coming into the environment. I also think that people need to recognize that when you go and bring data into a cloud platform, or into a hyperscaler environment, that data isn't governed. There aren't governance tools in a standard data warehouse or data lake or data platform. There are some, but you need to take a look at it and say, okay, well, how does that fit within our governance standards and approaches? And how do we deploy those same business-wide priorities onto that data set, or not, right? Make some decisions. But to me, it's about having management attention, having somebody who is willing to take a look at that from the enterprise-wide level, and building out where there need to be kind of open doors and open connectors, and open transformation or not, right? And kind of making those decisions, I think, is important.
Thank you. And you've mentioned graph a couple of times now. I just wondered, would you be able to give us a short insight into graph?
Yeah, I mean, graph is just a technology kind of borrowed from analytics, and taking that same thinking around how do you visualize data elements, data objects, and do so in a way that is a little bit more like a modeling environment, where, and I kind of think of it as a bit like a sandbox, where you can visualize and say, okay, I'm going to bring this in, and what's that going to do to the model? How does it fit? How does it sync? And graph is a way to visualize and to model the data, model the knowledge, model the information. And it comes with, I think, a lot of flexibility to define the right semantics, right, that you're going to use. What are the common definitions, the common standards? And then you can see through the graph, what fits and what doesn't. I think that's kind of a simple way to explain it. Um, and it also, in the data world, uses ontology, which is a bit like metadata, where you have data about the data. It's a little more smarter than that now. We've gotten to add a bit more intelligence around it. But essentially, it's about kind of profiling and transparency and understanding how the data fits together.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And just going back slightly, you talked about earlier about going full circle, if you like, and having lots and lots of data. We want as much data as possible. Then GDPR came around, thinking, oh, do we really need this data, and how long
Right.
are we allowed to keep it and get rid of it? And then
Right.
going back again, and we talked about, you mentioned AI and
Yeah.
obviously the volumes of data. So is the rise of AI going to impact how organizations approach data management in the future?
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely. I mean, really, it's transforming everything, data included. I did see something really interesting, Craig, from an SAP point of view, backed up by McKinsey, that 80% of business processes will be touched, enabled, improved by AI in the
Wow.
future. So, of course, data management is right there with it. I think I look at it from two sides of the coin, that looking at the data that powers AI. So, do you have the right volume of data, type of data, quality of data, sets of data, standards of data, ethics around data, responsibilities and relevance of data to power your AI work, right? And you can use AI to even help you do that, right? And this is kind of the other side of the coin, is AI that powers data.
Hmm.
So you can use AI to create synthetic data. You can use AI to deduplicate now and to help data quality and the management of the data. You can use that intelligence and machine learning to standardize the data, to deploy your data governance processes. So I think you kind of have to look at it from both sides, from the data processes themselves that can be more efficient and more accurate using AI, and then having the right data within the intelligence platforms to ensure you're getting the results and the validity and the trustworthiness that you need. But it's a great place to be, Craig. I mean, in the data world, I'm sure I share this with other data practitioners, that there's always something new. There's always something, on the horizon, some new way of thinking, some new technology, some new challenges that make our jobs the best. I mean, for us that, kind of like a challenge, it's a great place to be.
Certainly keeps everybody on the toes, and nothing stays standing still. And I suppose on that point, Tina, how's SAP helping customers in this regard?
So we see that it's our job to ensure that our customers, from an AI, let's take AI perspective, but I think this applies kind of across all of our solutions, that they are considering and deploying relevant solutions. They are being responsible with how those solutions are being delivered, and they're being kind of respectful of the business processes that are needed, that they are respecting the element of the human that's involved in some of these new technologies, and that we are taking the leading edge for vetting out and applying all the core fundamentals that SAP has valued over the years. And one of the reasons why I love the company so much is that we stick to what's always been truthful. Is that data secured? Is that data consumable? Is that the right data that's needed for the business process? Are we delivering the right value? Are we making things more simple, more efficient, effective, and keeping it, from that lens, from our perspective, with all these new technologies coming our way, we feel that we're going to stick to what we do best, and that's the business processes and the
Thank you.
industry knowledge, and being able to give guidance and advice to our customers on the right scenarios that we've already vetted, in terms of how they can get value from these different toolings. And then how do the toolings and how do the concepts work together? I think we have a responsibility to help our customers architect, for the future, and understand, what should they be looking at, down the road, in terms of what fits with their current state architecture, or what they need to be shifting and adjusting if need be, and then helping them to define the strategy. So I've got a lot of customers that come to me and say, Well, Tina, it's great that you've got a point of view on data strategy, but what are you doing for AI strategy? Can you help us build the right framework? Can you help us identify the use cases, the business value? And so we're doing that as well, ensuring that companies can, take advantage of our knowledge and our expertise, and then we're there to, kind of support them, throughout the journey and the transformation.
Thank you, Tina. And just as we come to a close now, just one, I'll leave the final word to you, if I may. What is your top data management tip that you would like to leave everybody who listens to this podcast to remember?
So I've been sharing this at conferences and other webinars, and every time I do, I just smile because it's so true and so relevant. Um, I heard it from a customer and I've tweaked it a bit, but here it is. Data doesn't like silos. Data is social. It thrives when shared and combined with other bits of information. That's where data can significantly create more value. So think of data as being sociable, as needing to be shared, and gets even better when combined with other bits of information.
Thank you. So I suppose data's like us. We are sociable
Exactly.
beings. That's what it's all about. Tina, thank you. Thank you very much for your time and your insights, and thank you for being with us today.
My pleasure. Anytime, Craig. Anytime at all.
Thanks very much, and thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed the conversation and found it valuable. Please make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. And until the next time, stay safe, stay well, and be happy.